Hello everyone. This short video today is going to hopefully get us started with the engineering design process, and we're going to focus specifically on the desired outcomes portion, and we'll also probably try to have a little bit of fun and answer a maybe not so simple question. Where is Margaritaville? So the outline for our video here will be as follows. We're going to first take an opportunity to look at the Margaritaville subdivision and try to, break down some of their marketing materials that they've put together and try to understand a little bit more about how the vision for a project kind of ties into the overall engineering process. And then from there, we want to see if we can somehow transform what might be a broad vision for a project into a specific vision statement that is going to ultimately kind of orient the engineering design process. After that, we'll define goals and see how those are used to further refine the desired outcomes for a project, as well as objectives. After that, we've put together some what we're calling pre-writing tasks, or basically just a few items to help get things started. And then finally, the writing assignment for submittal number 1 and what you're going to need to do to get started on this portion of your conceptual design study. So just to recap, the model that we've set out to explore during our senior design capstone sequence, CIV 470 and 480, it looks like this. We're going to try to start with some desired outcomes. That's where we're at right now. And then the real engineering work that we're going to be doing is going to be based on developing concepts, doing analysis, relying on experience, both our own and experience of other people, but all within the context of constraints. And once we've completed our process, we'll work on doing design drawings and all the validation that we need to demonstrate to various permitting agencies and other organizations that what we're proposing to do is both legal and meets the requirements of those different agencies. But to get started with the process of desired outcomes, I like the phrase desired outcomes because it's kind of a catch-all, and it includes, it can include a lot of things, but what we're going to look at in this discussion today is how those desired outcomes can really be expanded into 3 different categories. And so we can talk about a vision for the projects that we're looking at. We can talk about goals for a project, and then we'll also hopefully narrow things down a little bit more and talk about objectives. And so I thought it would be interesting, since we're here in Daytona Beach studying civil engineering, to look at really one of the biggest civil engineering projects or residential developments that's in the process of being constructed or planned, designed, and constructed right now, and that is the Latitude Margaritaville community. And I've gone through the some of the brochures or marketing documents for this, and just wanted to pick out a few things to kind of get us started thinking about the concept of a vision a little bit more closely. And so very first page of the marketing brochure for this new development asks the question, where is Margaritaville? Now, I'm going to assume that everybody is at least semi-literate in the world of music and has heard the song by Jimmy Buffett, Margaritaville. If you haven't, you'll have to go look that up and listen to it. But what I wanted to point out right here is, as part of developing the vision for this new community, Jimmy Buffett scripted a short little two little paragraphs that go like this. It's in the tropics, somewhere between the port of indecision and southeast of disorder, but no parallels of latitude or longitude mark the spot exactly. Goes on a little bit more to talk about palm trees, sailboats, seaplanes, things like that. Then it ends with the last paragraph. There's a beach and a thatched roof bar perched on the edge of the turquoise sea where you can always find a bar stool. There are lots of lies and loads of stories. It's a comical concoction that blends together like tequila, salt, and limes. So Jimmy Buffett says, where is Margaritaville? It's really in your mind. And so, again, if you haven't listened to the song Margaritaville by Jimmy Buffett, it's a absolute must. But there's actually some stuff in here that's a little bit deeper than that. So if you're really a Jimmy Buffett fan, you might have picked up on some of this stuff, but there's a little YouTube video clip here from another song that hopefully will tie this in a little bit better.
Son of a sailor, for all the sailors in San Diego. As the son of a sailor, I went out on the sea for adventure, spanning the view of the captain and crew like a man just released from indenture. As a dreamer of dreams and a traveling man, hell, I chalked up many a mile, read dozens of books about heroes and crooks, and I learned much from both of their styles. Son of a son, son of a son, son of a son of a sailor, son of a gun, load the last ton, one step ahead of the jailer. Now in the near future, southeast of disorder, you can shake the hand of the mango man as he waits you out the door.
So yeah, you can look the song up and listen to the rest of it if you really want to, but the whole idea behind this development is to really tap into this lifestyle that Jimmy Buffett has spent really an entire musical career creating. And so if you're a big Jimmy Buffett fan and you read that Where is Margaritaville pitch right there, you're going to see a lot, and it's probably going to spark your interest and hopefully draw you in as a potential customer to this community. And so you flip to the next page of the brochure and it says, actually, well, Margaritaville's not just in your mind. There's a place. We're building a place that represents all of these things, that represents all of these ideas. And this is going to be the first of these kind of Jimmy Buffett themed over 55 communities, and it's going to be built right here in Daytona Beach, Florida. And so again, the purpose of the marketing brochure is to send a message to people who might be interested about what this community is supposed to feel like. What does it look like? What are the key demographics involved? I look at this, I see a lot of palm trees. I see kind of the tiki bar feel, the nice swimming pool, and probably the over 55 demographic that it's trying to promote. But then it's also trying to basically say that the Margaritaville lifestyle is what you're going to find right here. And so that's the vision, trying to say, where's Margaritaville? Well, it's going to be right here in Daytona Beach, Florida. Well, we're engineers, so let's shift gears a little bit. What does this piece of land actually look like? What does it take to actually build a community, a residential community on physical real land, to help make this vision a reality? And so I have here the property description survey of just one of the parcels that is currently in the design phase for this subdivision, and it's pretty complicated. This is basically the legal description of the actual land. So if you want to know whether or not you are in Margaritaville or not, you can refer to this legal description, and if you're inside these boundaries, you're in Margaritaville. If you're outside of these boundaries, well, you're somewhere else. And so it's pretty lengthy document. If you've taken a surveying class, you should recognize a lot of the nomenclature here, but basically we're talking down to 1/100th of a foot, so that's less than an inch. We have physically measured out, or people, the surveyors, have physically measured out the boundaries of this community. So this is the first page. It keeps going and going. This is finally it. And so this particular phase has a total of over 1,600 acres. That's going to be part of the third major phase of this development. So if we want to look at where this is going to take place in the city of Daytona, this is a slightly older Google Earth image, but just to spend some time orienting ourselves and getting up to speed on the location of things. There's Interstate 95. There's International Speedway Boulevard. There's Clyde Morris Boulevard. If you look right there, that's our entire campus. So that includes both the main campus as well as the athletic fields. On the other side of Clyde Morris, there's the International Speedway right there. And so if you notice, west of 95, there's the LPGA development that's based around, or just to the south and east of LPGA Boulevard. And then up here to the north, we have State Road 40 and Granada. But if you look there in between State Road 40, Granada, and LPGA, there's really not a whole lot of development yet. But phase 1 of Margaritaville is, I think, pretty much completed. I know they've sold pretty much all of the residential lots in that phase. They're currently under construction here for phase 2. And then this is the third phase that we just had that legal description for. And that is the space that it's going to occupy. So basically everywhere north of, between LPGA and south of State Road 40 is the plan for this Margaritaville community. So it is definitely would be considered transformative as far as regional impact, development, and both environmental impacts on utilities, impacts on municipalities and roadways. So there's a lot of civil engineering that has to go into turning that vision or that dream into a reality. So that's kind of the basic footprint of the Latitude Margaritaville community. So again, from an engineering perspective, or what we're going to be looking at in this course, is basically how do we transform that vision, or the vision for a particular project, as noted by the little picture on the left, into some kind of functional system. So turning that vision into, in this case, this is a conceptual drawing for that third phase. And so really all this drawing does is it gives you some basic idea of what the layout is, what land is gonna remain undeveloped. So you see the wetlands there, and then all of the blue items that you see, those are going to be stormwater retention ponds. But again, the purpose of this conceptual drawing is just to communicate kind of how large the development's going to be, and generally how it's going to be laid out. This has some different sub phases labeled into it, so it's obviously going to take a while to complete all of this development, but this is on its way to becoming the functional system of Margaritaville. And then here's another drawing from, this is actually the entrance to Margaritaville for phase 2 of the development. And there's a lot going on here, but I picked this one because it represents more of the technical details that civil engineers are responsible for when it comes to this type of development work. The information about the roadways, information, in this case this is more of a paving, grading, and drainage plan. And so what you're really going to be able to gather from here is going to relate to stormwater management, all of the stormwater inlets, all of the stormwater piping. And you see up in this region here, these are going to be those wet detention ponds that are going to accommodate a lot of the stormwater. And so this is, for us in this class, this is going to be the goal of the final product by the end of the spring semester, is that we're going to be able to have some sort of detailed design drawing that represents what needs to be done to get the project actually built. But again, all of this work over here to the right still is tied back to that original vision. You'll notice if you're driving in, so you're coming in off of Timber Creek Road, you turn right, there's going to be some really fancy landscaping in here. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of palm trees. You get past the guardhouse, but then what's the first thing that you're going to see as you're driving past the guardhouse and into the community? On the right-hand side, it doesn't look very fancy here, but you're going to have a nice wet detention pond, which is going to look like a lake. Over here on the left, you're going to have another one, so you're basically going to be surrounded by water. And then you've got other detention ponds here and the people's backyards. Basically, everywhere you look, there should be some kind of connection or some kind of feel related to water, and that's obviously a critical part of this vision. So, again, our purpose for right now is simply to focus on the vision, and then I'm just showing you these kind of these drawings as examples of how civil engineers are involved in turning that vision into some sort of reality. I have a couple other examples of vision statements for different types of projects, and we'll go ahead and focus on a vision statement at this point to try to illustrate how we can summarize the vision for a project into a short, succinct statement that hopefully communicates really what the overall impact, overall desires for the project might be. And so I've used the example of the beachside redevelopment project. We talked about this one in class, and so we have now a lot of vacant land all up and down the beachside, from Ormond Beach all the way down through Daytona Beach shores. If you go back historically, all the way back to the 40s and 50s, there were just hotel after hotel after hotel, small establishments, usually nothing more than 2-3 stories high, park right outside your hotel room door, and then you're basically staying right on the world's most famous beach. And so what might be a possible vision statement for a redevelopment project at a site like this? And so the statement that I put together was, this project is intended to help restore Daytona Beach as a premier tourist destination for race fans and their families from across the southeastern U.S. The developers for this project believe the seaside resort should not be the exclusive domain of the wealthy, but should also be accessible to working families. The proposed project will revitalize what is quickly becoming a blighted area and lay the foundation for future development and a rejuvenated tourist district beside the ocean in Daytona Beach. So again, that is a possible vision statement for this type of project. There are certainly others, and the group that's working on this project will definitely be meeting with their client and discussing and kind of hashing out what that vision statement is. But at the end of the day, that vision statement then is going to ultimately guide the rest of the process. Here's another really interesting example that's also close by to our neighborhood. This is the Volusia Square shopping center that is basically at the corner of US 92. That's International Speedway Boulevard over here, and then Williamson Boulevard hooks around here. You can actually kind of see a little edge of Daytona International Speedway right here. And so at one time, this was a really busy hopping shopping center. There was a Toys R Us. There was a H.G. Craig. Movie theater was right down here. A couple of other really large. I think an Old Navy was in this facility as well. But if you drive to this shopping center today, you'll find that it's mostly empty. The only thing that's still really active is the Home Depot. I think there are some restaurants down in this area that seem to be doing okay, but you've got this really underutilized space over here in this shopping center. And so you may have heard about this new project called Space Square, where the Embry-Riddle Research Park community is teaming up with another organization to try to redevelop this existing shopping center into a new type of research space for the aerospace industry. And so this just came out of a newspaper article on the project very recently. It says Space Square's mission is to transform the entry point of Daytona's iconic International Speedway Boulevard into the home for innovative private aerospace and technology research and development facilities. So again, trying to set a course or establish a vision for the project is really important from the very beginning. And then our own president, Dr. Butler, he made the comment that the expansion of Embry-Riddle Research Park and our partnership with Space Square are positive signs that Volusia is well on its way to becoming a strong strategic lever for economic development along the I-4 corridor. So, what each group is going to do to try to kind of get the wheels turning and get things started for the writing assignment that we've developed to help you get through the vision statement is you're going to first read through. We're going to use the Latitude Margaritaville development kind of as an example that we're all going to look at together. And so we're going to have every student is going to read through the entire brochure. That's going to be posted for you up on Canvas. And then I would like for each student to go ahead and take a shot at writing a brief vision statement for that Latitude Margaritaville project. It's obviously going to hopefully include some of the civil engineering elements that need to happen, but it's not super critical that is incorporated at this point. But I just want you to get a little bit of practice developing a vision statement for a project where we have, I think, pretty good documentation of what that vision is. We don't really have, though, a nice concise vision statement that civil engineers could use to get started with or kind of guide their overall work. So after each individual student writes their own vision statement, I'd like for the students to get together in their groups and share them, discuss them, hash them out, and work together to come up with what you consider to be the final or best vision statement for the project, for the Margaritaville project that your group can come up with. And so we'll have a space on Canvas for you to work on that collaboration and submit your work right there. Here are some bullet points to help get you started with that vision statement development process. Just some fill-in-the-blank sentences. You're not limited to this, and I hope that you break away from this model just a little bit. But if you're having trouble getting started, these are some good ideas or good little prompts to help you navigate the process and get a few ideas down on paper, and then hopefully as you work together as a group you can put your words together into something that's a little bit more authentic or individualized to your group. Sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to take a vision or the marketing materials that you might have access to and actually connect it to something that's useful for civil engineering. Of course, we want the vision statement to be something that's really broad and all-encompassing, talks about why the project is going to happen, what impacts the project are going to have in the community, and how it's going to affect the stakeholders. But what we also really need to focus on, if we're interested in connecting this or using the vision statement to orient the civil engineering process, is trying to connect it to two critical elements. The first of those is place, and so where and very specifically will the project make its impact, and then the second one has to do with the relationship to infrastructure. So infrastructure is basically just from a civil engineering perspective, it's all of the elements in our cities and our communities that allow us to do the things that we do. And so how is this proposed project going to enhance or really transform whatever a community's basic capacity might be for getting something done or having some type of activity occur? It's important too to think about the audience for a vision statement. This is typically if an engineer is submitting a document for the city to review, for the county to review, for any of the government regulators to review, people who are going to be authorizing the project. A vision statement is something that you can always include at the very beginning of that to kind of set the stage for what your work is setting out to do. General public is also somebody or a group that is a good target audience for the vision statement. When somebody reads your vision statement, anybody reads your vision statement, they need to at least get a general sense of what's happening. And then finally, something that your client might be interested in is a vision statement for the financial backers of a project. And so making sure that you can communicate at least a direction from the client's overall vision for the project. If you can refine that a little bit more into the vision for the project that the financial backers are going to actually be supporting, that's really an important thing to consider for the audience as well. As far as what are some characteristics of a good vision statement, you don't want to rely on a lot of technical language. They're probably 3 to 4 sentences, maybe a little bit more if needs be, but it needs to be something short, something that you can wrap your mind around in a very quick read. And then finally, just making sure that what you're trying to do is connect the audience to whatever the feelings or the intentions are that your project is hoping to invoke. The next item that we're going to be looking at relates to goals, and so we've finished discussing vision, and now for the goals, what we're really looking at this level is trying to identify some features that really distinguish or differentiate your project. So what are some of the main things that you're trying to accomplish or setting out to do? And these definitely needs to be more specific than a vision. We're starting to talk about specific elements of a project or of the physical system that you're trying to create that are going to come into form or come into being as a result of your engineering work. Now, I usually tend to think of goals, especially at this stage in the process, as being somewhat aspirational. You might have a client who owns a piece of property or is thinking about a piece of property, and they have some ideas about what they would like to see done, what they would like to have built on a project, or what they would like to accomplish through a project. And of course, if you notice on the little black box model that we have in the lower right hand corner here, all of these arrows are two-way arrows. So we have desired outcomes, which include our goals, but they're always interacting and they're always engaging with constraints. And so as you progress through your project, you're going to develop a better understanding of what the constraints are. And so a lot of the goals will have to be revised along the way. But if you don't start with a set of goals at the beginning of your effort, you'll probably be floundering a little bit. So that should hopefully give you a general idea. So some examples of goals I picked just from the brochure, the amenity center for Margaritaville. So this is a very specific piece, or this is almost actually a little sub-project of the entire Margaritaville development, but I just extracted a few bullet points of the specific types of things that they're going to want to see happen for this amenity center. So resort style pool, the gathering areas and tiki bar. I just looked at the picture and see some people playing live music there. That might require some interesting infrastructure. Tennis courts, pickleball courts, and then this other one here, private oceanfront beach club. That's a whole nother project in and of itself, but again, it's a goal for the overall development. Now, there are also some other goals that you'll want to keep in mind and talk with your client about. A lot of goals can relate to things like environmental impacts. How is this project going to impact the environment? What are some of the goals that you and your client might work on or develop to hopefully minimize those environmental impacts. The client is also going to have their own financial goals that they need to meet. So for a development like Margaritaville, they might know that they need to buy 1,600 acres of land, or at least one phase is going to be 1,600 acres of land. It might cost $24 million to buy that 1,600 acres of land. But then the question becomes, how many houses do we need to fit on this property in order to make this a financially viable development? So those goals should be predetermined before the serious engineering work begins in earnest. And then there are also other project management and timeline goals. So how long do we have to construct this project? What are some of the critical paths that need to be considered related to the goals of the project? As you're working through the process of developing goals for your project and trying to think through how we're going to connect this to the overall civil engineering process, it's important to acknowledge a slight shift in the audience when you're thinking about developing a list of goals for the project. And so, whereas the vision statement was meant to be very broad and communicate the feelings of a project to the general public, or just a broad overview, I think of goals as a very important communication mechanism between the client and the engineer. And so you're really trying to ensure a fundamental or basic understanding of what this engineering work that you're setting out to do is going to accomplish at the end. And your list of goals has to make sure that everyone is on the same page about what the project is going to deliver when everything is completed. And so some characteristics of a list of goals that makes the connection to civil engineering work: you still probably want to use technical language very sparingly, or only when absolutely necessary. Again, this is between the engineer and the client, and so you want to make sure that everything you include in your goals can be, at the very least, understood by your client. And then I think goals is a good place to use either numbered or bulleted lists. If certain items are higher priority than others, then a numbered list might be appropriate. If all things are generally considered equal in the project, then a bulleted list might be appropriate. But most importantly, what you're trying to do is identify what the key features are, and making sure that the client understands that once this project is finished, these are the elements that are going to be present and functional in the finished system. And so the final element that we're going to take a look at in this assignment, or this discussion about the assignment, relates to objectives. So we've talked about vision, which is very, very high altitude, high level, trying to set out and establish what the overall impacts of a project are going to be. We've talked about goals, which highlight kind of specific elements that you hope to achieve, but we consider these things to be aspirational and things that can change as a project develops. But then the final item that we have is objectives. And so you kind of distinguish objectives, or at least engineers typically distinguish objectives as elements of a project that represent the quantifiable outcomes. So what are the specific, very specific things that a particular project needs to accomplish? So drawing on the beachside redevelopment example again, we have as an objective, it might be we want 50 hotel rooms, each one at 600 square feet per room. We might need to allocate space for 60 parking spaces for 60 passenger vehicles. We might need a restaurant with seating for 80. I threw in an Olympic-sized saltwater swimming pool with 5,000 square feet of pool deck. We'd like to have a barbecue area where we can watch the waves and have some barbecue grills out there. And then just for fun, why not throw in an 18-hole mini golf course? And so again, at the beginning, these might be objectives, but then the role or the job of the engineer is going to be to take these objectives and try to fit them or make sure that they can all fit together within the space that you have and all of the constraints. So we're going to have to learn a little bit more, talk a little bit more about constraints before we would set out trying to do that. But these are the types of objectives that you need to work with your client to develop before you really begin the engineering work in earnest. As you begin the process for developing the list of objectives for your specific project and trying to connect that to the overall civil engineering design process, it's important to recognize again another shift in the audience of who these objectives are intended to connect. And so I like to think of objectives as being very useful for communicating either between different engineering teams or within an engineering team. And again, with objectives, you're trying to communicate specific quantifiable details. And so all of the engineering teams need to understand what those specific quantifiable details are. They're also useful for communicating with regulators and reviewers. They're often very, very interested and accountable to the public that they serve for really being able to quantify and specify specific impacts that the project is going to be having. But then finally, it's also important that the engineer and client are on the same page with the specific design objectives as well. Some guidelines for developing a good list of objectives. It's okay to use technical language when you're developing objectives. Just make sure that when the information is communicated back to the client that there's enough detail present so the client is fully aware of what's going on. And then again, numbered or bulleted lists is also acceptable. And just finally, making sure that whatever the goals of the project that were identified in the previous step are now tied to something that's quantifiable, something that the client can use or both the engineers and the client can use to measure the impacts or measure the outcomes that the project is going to have. And these are going to be the objectives that ultimately drive all of the engineering decision making. And so just take a couple seconds here to talk about the actual assignment on desired outcomes that you're going to turn in as a both individually and as a group. And so I've got 3 little pre-writing activities that I'm going to have you work on. The first one we already discussed a little bit. It was to analyze the existing Latitude Margaritaville project. I want you to read through the brochure, and each individual student is going to develop a vision statement for that project. And then once you have that, your group is going to meet together, discuss it, and then use that to form a final product that is representative of the group. After that, and this is all in preparation for discussion with your client, I would like to meet individually with each group to have a discussion a little bit more about your project and talk about who is going to serve in the role as client. So who is going to be responsible for establishing the vision, goals, and objectives. Some of those elements might be actually delegated to your group, but we also have some type of external advisor or external client that's also going to provide some input there for you. So we're going to meet with you individually to discuss that. Finally, the final pre-writing activity, you're actually going to conduct an interview with your client. Their purpose of the interview is basically just to discuss what their interpretation of the vision, goals, and objectives are for the project. And so those are the 3 different pre-writing activities that you're going to go through. And then the actual writing assignment itself is going to consist of 2 parts. So the first thing you're going to do for your writing assignment is provide a brief overview of this discussion with the client. And so you might want to include a little bit about what you learned about your client. What type of work do they do? Who are they responsible to? Basically, what are their interests in this project, and then also trying to identify or highlight what you consider to be some of the major gaps. Maybe your client doesn't really have a clear understanding of what the objectives are because they don't know yet what's possible with the given site. If that's the case, you may be spending some time working with them to develop a set of reasonable objectives for a particular project. Other projects might have objectives that are very clearly laid out, but the goal here is to have your group analyze and identify the major gaps that need to be filled in. And then the second part of this writing assignment is actually going to be to develop a 2-page document that is going to describe your client, but then most importantly, what is the vision for the project, a list of goals, and a list of objectives. And this really is going to serve as, once you get this finished, is going to serve as the opening section for your final report for this semester. So you're basically building, each of these writing assignments that you're going to be doing is going to be tied to the final report. So this is really the section 1 of your final report that you're developing here. For now, I'm going to let you work on it in your groups. I just have some basic requirements or details for the document. What you turn in should be double spaced. I think it's very important, especially when you start getting down into bulleted lists, when you get down to goals and objectives, that you start incorporating bulleted lists. And at this point, I think each item in your bulleted list doesn't need to just be a single item. You need to state what the object is and then provide some additional context or information around it. And then, of course, you want to use appropriate headings and subheadings along the way. And so that's it for this discussion. There is a assignment on Canvas that will have all of the major elements of this down in writing and places for you to submit your work. And if you have any other questions or comments, you can always reach out to your professor, and I will do the best I can to keep you moving along. So thanks, and we'll see you in class.